So welcome everyone. Welcome to this conversation where we are looking at universities and how they're responding to the mass atrocities that Israel is committing. Specifically, we're asking a number of questions. We're asking if universities have issued statements on Israel's assault on Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And we're also asking if universities, unions, associations have stayed silent, and if those who are present can comment on or explain the silence. And we're also asking about the relationships that universities have with Israeli private and public institutions, private military contractors, and also with the Israeli Defense Forces. And we're asking if, in light of the mass atrocities that Israel is committing, we're asking what the implications of these relationships and links are. And if the universities haven't adjusted these relationships, are they complicit in the crimes that Israel is committing? And we're also asking about the effect that the mass atrocities are having on universities, on academics, on students, and on others within the university system. And specifically, or as part of that, what effect is the assault, Israel's assault, having on Palestinian students, academics, and others in the university system in Palestine and Israel? And what obligations do universities around the world have towards their own students, as well as towards students, lecturers, and others in Palestine and Israel? And in this session, we've got 4 speakers. We've got Dr. Peter Jones, who is a reader in language and communication in the Department of Humanities at Sheffield, Hallam University. We've got Ioana-Melania Pahome, who is a 3rd-year fine art history student at Manchester Metropolitan University and is part of Youth Front for Palestine, which is based in both Manchester and Birmingham. And we've got Ian Parker, who is a practicing psychoanalyst in Manchester, who works with the Red Clinic. His books include, co-authored with David Pavone, Sela, Psychoanalysis and Revolution, Critical Psychology for Liberation Movements, which has so far been published in 8 languages. And we've got Paola Rivetti, who is an associate professor at Dublin City University and part of the Council of the British Society for Middle Eastern Studies and a member of the Committee for Academic Freedom of the Italian Society for Middle East Studies. So we'll start, maybe we start with, who do we start with? Maybe we start with you, Ian.
Yes, okay then. I do work in a university and have done for many years, but I'm going to talk about my work as a psychoanalyst with the Red Clinic, because the Red Clinic has a lot of overlap with work going on in academic institutions, and we've seen attempts to close down solidarity with Palestinians in the universities and in the psychoanalytic organizations. And we need to be able to respond to that threat. And our response must be to protect a space of free, open, scholarly debate and a space of what we call free association in the clinic. And that's why I bring the perspective of the Red Clinic to this event. The Red Clinic is a collective of communist mental health workers bringing free and low-cost therapy to people in distress. And we're inspired by the example of Freud's free clinics in Europe before the rise of fascism and the Second World War, and also by colleagues in different parts of the world taking that work forward, particularly in Brazil. So first of all, I want to relay to you a statement that's been drawn up by the Red Clinic and signed by psychoanalysts around the world. So here goes with that. We're in solidarity with our colleagues in Gaza, standing with Palestine against the genocide currently being waged by the Israeli state. And this current onslaught, which has already resulted in the death of countless thousands of people in Gaza, and by many murders by settlers of Palestinians in the West Bank, is being conducted with the support of regimes in the global north that care nothing for human life. The Israeli state and those who deliberately abet it care nothing for those they portray as subhuman and whom they tolerate at best as powerless victims. We're also aware of instances of clinical practitioners inside the Israeli state siding with that state and causing obstructions in their contracted supervision of Arab psychotherapists, with consequent effects for the already traumatized Arab patients. This is unconscionable complicity in oppression, a betrayal of the ethics of psychoanalytic practice. So this context, as many international organizations and local organizations in Israel have declared for many years, this is apartheid. Still worse are the proclamations of psychoanalysts inside and outside Israel that instrumentalize the 7th of October attacks in order to support the ongoing invasion of Gaza. Now, critical support doesn't preclude unconditional support for people dispossessed of their land for 75 years, nor actually does it preclude condemnation of the Hamas attacks. Ambivalence about organizations and slogans engaging in resistance doesn't warrant a kind of hypocritical neutrality over the rights of the Palestinian people. So our task is to resist the ideological and state offensive carried out against Palestinians. And we call upon our colleagues to dissociate themselves from the war on Gaza and to state unequivocally that they'll speak and act for Palestine. This is no time to be silent. Well, okay, statements like this, which have already been signed by many psychoanalysts, need to be linked to action. There are practical steps that we can take, and the Red Clinic has been supporting Palestinian psychotherapists. We have Arabic-speaking supervision groups where we enable activity and thinking, and we do need financial resources to extend the work of those groups. And we also, in the spirit of the best of the university, we need to conceptualize the role of psychoanalysis as a critical tool. So that's what I want to turn to now in the second part of my contribution. How do we, revolutionary psychoanalysts, respond to this crisis? And I think there are a number of ways that we can think psychoanalytically about what's happening now in the ongoing genocidal attacks by the Israeli state against the Palestinians. And remember, this isn't only taking place against the Palestinians of Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And a first aspect that we focus on is to do with the space that we inhabit as revolutionaries and psychoanalysis. And that is that psychoanalysis is profoundly internationalist. It refuses to attach itself to particular nation states. And that's something that's very clear in Freud's response to Zionist calls to support the nationalist project. Yet he was subject to anti-Semitism and he valued his heritage and identity as a Jew, but he rejected attempts by colleagues who had emigrated to Palestine to construct a Jewish nation-state institutions in the name of psychoanalysis. Furthermore, the main funder of Freud's psychoanalytic publishing house in Europe, Max Eitingen, also moved to Palestine and funded psychoanalysis there. And here is a little noticed fact. Max Eitingen also gave significant funding to the Palestine Communist Party. The second aspect concerns contradiction. We have a small group supporting the Red Clinic here in Manchester, and a group of comrades from different parts of the world who've been active now in the Palestine solidarity protests. They're clear that not all Palestinians support Hamas, not all Jews support Israel, not all of us locals, among them, support the British state, by the way. We aim to dismantle it. The point here is that there's no such thing as homogeneous identity. We are all divided subjects, and culturally and ethnically divided and separate from each other. So a homogeneous state is anathema to us. Our task is to oppose and replace nation-state structures here at home and act in solidarity with our comrades inside the Israeli state who are opposing that state. And the third aspect concerns time. A potent ideological motif now is condemnation, what one colleague in the Red Clinic has termed the condemnation discourse that freezes us and locks us in a kind of permanent present. This has been voiced in recent commentaries in the mass media that explicitly refuse to step back from what happened in the Hamas attacks and to insist that we stay, as they put it, in the moment, to dwell on the event, to do justice to it. Now, psychoanalytic approaches to trauma are very different, analysing instead the conditions that bring about violence. We analyse how this past projects itself into the future, and as revolutionaries, we do not only predict, but we act. In the words of Marek Edelman, a leader and survivor of the 1943 Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, it is a case of, I quote, always being with the oppressed and never the oppressors. Now, in 2023, after an event on the 7th of October that we could not predict, and we are told to condemn and do nothing more, we're in the midst of a slow, drawn-out process of mass murder by a racist apartheid state. Mass murder that we can prevent. The Israeli state defines itself now in its nation-state law as a state of the Jewish people, nationalist, homogeneous, set on condemnation and revenge. Additionally, it's dead set on continuing a process that commenced with the Nakba, wiping out the Palestinian people, driving them out of Gaza as the next step in this vicious protest. So to be silent about this is to be complicit in repression and oppression. Standing with the Palestinian people now must go beyond sympathy for them as victims and build solidarity with them as active agents with all of their contradictions, forging their own liberation. So the Red Clinic stands in solidarity with the Palestinians against Israeli state terror. Thanks for listening. Thanks for organising this event as a space for thinking and speaking, and we hope mobilising for real, lasting peace.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you. And then next we hear from Mela.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Mala. I am a student, so I am very different timelines sometimes. But I'm also part of Youth Front for Palestine, which I have joined recently. But I have like long-standing solidarity from different groups. I wanted to talk about Manchester Metropolitan University as a student and my position there with power and their position with power in this. I went through your questions and kind of answered them to my best of my abilities. And they issued a statement that I would like to begin with. It was issued on the 11th of October, so not long after the escalation started. I want to speak about language, and I want to speak about language because at university we are like pressed to speak in a very specific way in essays, in public speech, in different things. So I want to treat the university in the same manner that they treat me, basically. So I will analyze their language as a way to express how I think they're complicit, as well as their investments. I want to start with October 11th, a few days after the attacks have escalated. The title of the statement is Conflict in Israel and Gaza, Sources of Support for You. This was also on the Moodle page in red. It was not sent out as an email, so we were not made aware of it unless you looked for it, if that makes sense. Language is extremely powerful, especially in an English dominant world in a Western university. We're witnessing the othering and dehumanization of Palestinians on our screen through language in the media and in other places. To start a statement with conflict, which directly translates as defined as by Oxford Languages, a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one, lasting longer than expected, instead of genocide, which is the deliberate killing of a population, is a clear statement to me as to what side they can stand on. It's a way of saying that they don't acknowledge this genocide. It's very important that this university should not call it a conflict, a religious war, or a war at all. Especially with the amount of academics that are actually above me and teaching me about this. I wish they also had my stance on this and helping me here. I would say that I compared the idea of genocide and war with what's happening between Ukraine and Russia. They have military backing, whereas Palestine doesn't. They don't have the funds the same way. And Palestine is basically erased from the statement on the October 11th. There is no mention of Palestine. There's only a mention of Gaza, which makes it inaccurate because the West Bank is never included in statements. They're nowhere to be seen, which makes it alarming. They also suggest a lot of mental health services, which we were talking about psychoanalysis earlier, how mental health is very important here. I have direct experiences with the services that they have recommended, and without acknowledging the systemic racism and dehumanization of a population, that treatment is ineffective because it stands empty. It's simply a gesture as a statement, but there's no afterthought in the statement. There was another statement issued on the date November 18th, which I didn't even see because it wasn't shared. I simply found it through my own research. And I want to use a quote that alarmed me. And I quote, "This is an extremely complex and sensitive situation with deep-seated views which many without direct links to the region may find difficult to fully understand or engage with." I could not agree less with this direct quote. I am representing this speaking session without being part of either community. That does not mean my views or actions stand misunderstood. I have actively engaged with both communities. I'm very, very good friends with both of them, and I have not once thought that this is complicated or in need of an academic degree to be understood. I believe that this only makes an excuse for the lack of education or education given is not fulfilling. We are in a time where information can be easily accessed anywhere, especially in an academic body like Manchester Metropolitan with international relations and everything. It has been 70 days and no more 73 since the second upcut began. There is no excuse for them to call this complicated is incorrect. I wanted to finish the statement piece from Manchester Metropolitan with quoting Decolonized Palestine to summarize that this is not an exceptional situation. We can look at South America apartheid. We can look at the genocide of indigenous people all across the world. And I quote, "It's complicated because it's special because it's complicated. The cycle continues, and Palestinians continue to lose their lives and lands, yet find themselves unable to clearly indict tormentors, lest they be accused of lacking nuance. These exceptions aim to legitimize what cannot be legitimized and defend what cannot be defended. So that when you look at injustice, oppression, and domination, and tell yourself it's not as clear cut as it looks." That's the message I got from my university when I read those statements. I then moved on to the UCU, as I know that there's a union branch. Their statements were issued on the 10th of October. Again, I'm very analytical. I want to see every single word, every single person that spoke there. I would like to highlight the use of language. They spread it in two motions, motion 1 and motion 2. In motion 1, they once again said Israel and Gaza. There was no mention of Palestine, no mention of West Bank, no mention of East Jerusalem. Without first starting properly, the whole argument can be a bit misunderstood afterwards or misled. for lack of better words. In motion 2, however, the branch does call out for an end of illegal occupation, highlights international law and how that can be described as genocide. And they are asking for solidarity and defense of those students, like myself, speaking in solidarity of Palestine. I can't say from experience that that is truly felt in the university on campus, especially for my Palestinian friends. They have been silenced through even their essays. They have been asked to not use terms such as settled colonialism, apartheid, in terms of describing Israel. And they wanted me to bring this forward to you when speaking about this, that even in essay writing, they're not even allowed to say it, although it is essay writing and it should be critically thought about. I wanted to speak about the links that they have because those are extremely important. I got my research from MCR Leftist Action, which do a lot of action on the grounds of Manchester Metropolitan, as well as Palestine Solidarity Campaign. The MMU has ties with the Israel Army for investments and funding. Barclays, one of the largest UK high street banks, has substantial shareholdings in 9 armed companies, one of them being Elbit Systems, which has been divested from by many companies from the illegal use of weapons. So for MMU to still invest in a bank that we are targeted for the BDS, boycott and divestment movement, shows a clear stance as to where they stand. At the protest, when I went, I didn't see anyone from the staff that I recognized, which was very disappointing because I have tutors. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to name, so I'm not going to name for now, but I have a tutor that has delivered a lecture on Palestine and Israel, and I just want to say that that is very much a bubble. It only happens in the art department because fine art people tend to be very much more outspoken about political issues, but my friends in sociology, politics, degrees that you expect to be spoken about doesn't get spoken about. He delivered the lecture, and yes, it was great, but he did not end the lecture with direct action. He did not end the lecture with the present time. He'd never said the word genocide. I think to see that from a lecturer that, you know, earns income from the research that he's made for Palestine and Israel is really disappointing because I really expected more. As someone who really wanted to learn and really wanted to engage, I feel like I had to go out my own way to try and find them. I had been trying to contact them. It's been useless so far. I've been met with silence. And the same silence we have been met with from MMU in terms of their a relationship with Elbit Systems and many others. We are trying to get them to divest. And one of the questions was, what do obligations do they have in terms of this? Well, I want to note the heavy importance of my privilege to be educated in an esteemed university in England. Without access to these resources, I wouldn't have been able to communicate this today. As I mentioned before, I hold the university to the same standards as I do any other institution or academic body that upholds colonialism. A group I refer to for resource gathering, direct action in the arts, specifically in cultural sectors, are actually art workers for Palestine Scotland, which have been great in direct action. They have been occupying galleries and have been doing open letters and helping us over here in Manchester with planning. And Glasgow against arms and fossil fuels. They've posted 4 demands, which I thought were really important. These demands were for University of Glasgow, but I'm pretty sure they can, you know, share for all universities that have ties. One of them is provide free tuition for displaced Palestinian students. 2, provide scholarship on humanitarian grounds. 3, strengthen partnership with Islamic University of Gaza. I want to mention that since writing this, there has been a report by, I'm trying to get the names up because I have a very long list here. There was a report that there's no more functioning universities in Gaza, which it's very shocking that no Western universities are speaking about, because if this had happened here, it would be all over the world. I personally cannot even imagine a university not existing anymore. Such an important place for people to speak and share and learn. And the 4th one, and the most important one, is end complicity, divest from armed companies and ban them from campus. And you can look up this on Apartheid of Campus, on Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and there's a lot of research that has been done in this that I have simply taken and put into this speech today, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bella.
Thank you very much.
And then we hear from Paulo.
Hi everyone, Ambrose, thank you so much for organizing this, and thanks to Mela and Ian for for saying so many important things and kind of laying the ground for this discussion and conversation, which I think is really important, because as I was saying before we started recording, it's very much about connecting people. So I'm really happy to be in contact with with you all, and kind of gotten to know your work and what you're doing. So I'm based in Ireland. I work in Dublin City University, but I kind of want to speak with a different hat today, if I may, as I'm part of the Committee for Academic Freedom of the Italian Society for Middle Eastern Studies, Sesamo. And I'm part of the Council of BRISMES, which is the British Society for Middle East Studies. But I think Nicola Pratt in the next session will go more into the detail of what's the Committee for Academic Freedom of BRISMES has been doing, and the situation in the UK. What I would like to do today is telling you something about what's happening in Italy, which has its own specificities. Of course, we heard from a colleague from Switzerland in the previous panel, and places like Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands are going through a very how can I say, are going through a very right-wing moment, if for the lack of a better definition, which has been not that Italy is not going through the same kind of moments, but in Germany and Switzerland at the moment, what we have is a extremely severe approach to anyone who's speaking up in solidarity with the Palestinian people, which is happening, which we know is part of a kind of global moment, but of course is taking slightly different characteristics everywhere. So talking about statements and what kind of statements have been released, issues in Italy, and the silence, which I find much more interesting, that we heard specifically from university and academic institutions, on the kind of bright side. So on the side of colleagues in different academias and different universities in Italy, student population, we have seen, I think, a mobilization in a measure, in a kind of magnitude that it was years that we hadn't seen. Many universities have been occupied. I mean, occupations haven't lasted long, but we have had the establishment of different student organization and platforms and networks that have been demanding suspension of connection and institutional collaborations with Israeli universities, in connection with complicity when it comes to not only the occupation, not only the settler colonial project, but also arm industry and kind of the technological development of dual use or straightforward military use technologies. So the students have been, I think, the leading force. Colleagues have also mobilized, and I'm saying this with full awareness of the fact that universities themselves are a mirror of society, and although I have colleagues in Italy who I consider people I actually politically organize and politically mobilize with on issues that pertain, Middle East politics more broadly. I'm also very much aware of the fact that we are a sort of, happy bubble in a wider context. Where universities is a functioning arm of, the dominant elites. And this is not surprising. I mean, this is, I'm not the first one to say that educational institutions do have, a disciplinary function as well. And I think so. So, in spite of this, with full awareness of of how university mirrors larger hierarchies and reproduces disciplinary contexts and rules and so forth and so on, I have to recognize the fact that there has been within the teaching staff a quite sustained mobilization in favor of the ceasefire and solidarity with the Palestinian people. In particular, I would like to mention a statement that has been released. I think it was I think it was early November, late October, that gathered so far over 4,500 signatures of colleagues based in Italy, in Italian universities, or Italian colleagues based abroad, like myself, who have signed this statement demanding an immediate ceasefire, the application of the international law, which, as we know, has a series of consequences when it comes to the occupation, when it comes to war crimes and so forth and so on. But also demanding the suspension and boycott of institutional collaboration with Israeli universities. So this statement has been, as I said, supported by several thousand, colleagues, which triggered a rather violent response from especially from journalists and especially from big kind of national newspapers. We have been called idiots. We have been called, a number of not very nice names. We have had, there have been also more kind of worrisome, episodes. So, for instance, there has been actually a few interviews of colleagues whose name was up to that moment rather obscure, but talking about the need for, I don't know if this makes sense. This is a term that makes sense in English, but in Italian would be something like a bonification, which basically means the sanitization of the university. But the very word goes back to, ties back to directly our fascist, the fascist time in Italy. So a rather violent, talking to Mella, talking about, language and analyzing language, a rather violent example. And then, of course, what we have had seen has been a revival. Well, actually, in Italy, it's very much an introduction, not a revival, but an introduction of, a trope that we have seen, in other places in the world, whereby anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism have been conflated. Or actually, it wasn't even about being anti-Zionist. So in the specific Italian discourse and kind of media, actually slandering of the colleagues, including myself, who have, supported the statement, it was framed as being anti-Israel and, of course, pro-Hamas. But apart from the, the pro-Hamas accusation, the trope of the conflation of, anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, which you have seen, in the UK, that better than me, very much big time, is also being introduced in Italy. I would say, for the first time. This is a rather, this is an innovation in kind of the public discourse that we have seen after, as one of the consequences of, the 7th of October. The last thing I'd like to say, well, actually, two more things, if I may. So the first one, something that I would really, like to emphasize without any romanticization of the university, but I would very much like to emphasize what I see as a distance between a student population, teaching staff, staff, administrative staff as well, who have been, taking a rather radical and taking a rather firm and, uncompromising, if you want, stand in favor of a ceasefire, in favor of an end of violence, in favor of the international law, and also in favor of boycott and the PACB. On the one side, along with the students, and on the other side, the governing authorities of the universities, the highest governing authority of the universities in Italy, in October, mid-October, issued this statement, you know, which was really, really lame, I must say. You know, they managed with very interesting linguistic, you know, with a very interesting language, not to mention the words, not to use the word Palestine or Palestinians in the whole, you know, in the whole statement. So a growing distance between these two poles, that is also reflected in the media, where we have this very strong, you know, very strong backlash against anyone who's calling for, you know, the implementation of it, you know, something also very, you know, the one would say very, you know, taken for granted, like the application of the international law, human rights conventions, and so forth and so on, have been, you know, accused of, you know, of being pro-Hamas, for instance. Francesca Albanese, who's the special rapporteur for the situation of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, for instance, has gone through this, you know, this mediatic, you know, persecution, really, I should say. So the last thing I want to mention is the situation of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, you know, and its adoption or implementation in Italy, because I think this is a very important, you know, topic. You know that better than me because you're all based in the UK. So as you know, colleagues and students and you know, intellectuals or activists in general are being persecuted on the grounds provided by the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. So the situation in Italy is slightly different. We do have the IHRA being adopted by, you know, by institutions. So the governing institutions of universities in Italy has suggested the adoption of it, but so far we only have one single university that actually adopted it, which is the University of Pisa. But we have, for instance, the council, the ministers' council, so the highest kind of governing authorities in the governments that we have in Italy, that adopted it. So this means that, you know, it's a sort of trickle down, you know, adoption and application. The IHRA is today informing a number of governmental strategies, such as all the education documents and educational, you know, procedures that go from the Ministry of Education down to, you know, primary schools, secondary school, high schools, and so forth and so on. Today it is informing the police textbooks, for instance, so that, you know, our police and, you know, our police forces, all of them, you know, are educated and kind of trained on recognizing anti-Semitism and, you know, anti-Semitic racism according to the HRA definition. You know, and a number of other procedures that go into actually disciplining and policing, you know, our public discourse, but also the way in which we mobilize and the way in which we express, you know, dissent and political opinions in the public sphere are today based on the IHRA. Which is, you know, which is a difference, as far as I know, from how it's being operationalized in the UK. So I'm gonna stop here. Yeah, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Paolo. And we hear from Peter next. Peter Jones.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Privileged to be on this panel. I thought I'd just briefly summarize the things that have been happening at my university, Sheffield Hallam University, in relation to the actions that we've taken there. Sheffield Hallam University has an absolutely dismal record in terms of Palestinian rights. Apart from its adoption of the IHRA definition, as Paolo was saying, which was done under the heavy influence of the organization called UK Lawyers for Israel, who have a representative in Sheffield Hallam. That definition was also used in the persecution of a Sheffield Hallam PhD student and then member of staff, Shahad Abu Salama, who was put through 4 investigations, one after the other, guided by this definition. She was exonerated in all, but it was enough to make her understandably decide to leave the university. But in the present situation, the action at Sheffield Hallam has focused around an open letter, first of all, to the university top management, signed by 300 staff and students within the university, openly demanding that the university speak out against the genocide in Gaza, speak out in support of international law, and speak out in support of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Needless to say, the university hasn't done that, but nevertheless, the campaign to force the university to do something and to shame the university into doing something is continuing. As I say, the open letter got 300 signatories. Part of the position that we took in the letter was that last year in February, when the Russian state invaded Ukraine, of course, the university was immediately broadcasting its condemnation of the Russian invasion, citing international law, condemning the deaths of civilians, and encouraging and financing a whole plethora of activities, including an immediate memorandum of understanding with a Ukrainian higher education institution, but getting all sorts of things going, and inviting students over and so on and so forth. Whereas when the Israelis' assault on Gaza began, there was a simple statement being very sad about the effect, the situation in the Middle East. As Mella was saying earlier, they can't even name who's involved. They can't name Palestinians. They can't name Israelis. And instead of taking a firm stand on the basis of international law against genocide, for God's sake, the university said it was unacceptable. It would be unacceptable to make a public statement. So it was on this basis that our letter was crafted, highlighting the double standards between the situation in the position that they took on Ukraine and the situation they took in Israel, Palestine. We even have the Helena Kennedy Center for International Justice, and that center, while being very vocal about Ukraine, could not say a bloody word about what was happening in Gaza. So this was the context. The letter, the open letter, was sent to the university leadership team. They replied saying that they couldn't. They were sticking with their position that they couldn't make a public statement. So we sent back another reply, which absolutely tore them to pieces, and said, "Look, you are being complicit in this, because it's your government, it's your state, it's your government that is actually materially, financially, every which way involved in the Israeli action. You have a duty, not just, this is something we'd like you to do. It is your responsibility as an important public institution to do everything you can to prevent genocide. You have a responsibility for that. There's no sitting on the fence. There's no neutrality when it comes to genocide." Anyway, again, they ignored us. So we organized a rally demonstration outside the university last Thursday, which was the day, coincidentally, of course, of our Vice-Chancellor's leaving the university. We had a rally outside, and later that afternoon, a group of people took direct action. They went into the university and forced the cancellation of that leaving event. That was a magnificent stroke of direct action. The letter itself that we sent initially, we've sent that out through social media as well. And at the same time, we organised a public lecture by Andrew Feinstein, who I think many of you will know, which was absolutely packed out on the subject of apartheid in Israel and in South Africa and Israel. And we've also been working very closely with Palestinian activists from students and staff members at the University of Sheffield. So the first time ever, we've got a collaboration, actually a functioning collaboration between the two universities. Our union, our trade union, UCU, has been very active. We've passed some very good, strong motions, and we're also, at the same time, taking up the issue of boycott, divestment, and sanctions within the two universities. So this is really only, I think, the start of it. But I think the message that we have to have is, yes, universities they have a responsibility, a duty to do everything they can to prevent genocide and to oppose it. That was the starting point of our action. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. I don't know, does anyone who's listening in have anything that they want to say? Yes, Paul.
Sorry, I hope, Peter, my question is for you. I hope this is not a naive question. I'm sure. So I ask the question first, but I'm really curious to know how, if there's any kind of legal angle or hook or procedural hook that you have been using to kind of make the point to your, governing authorities at the university that it is their duty to take action, to do anything in their power, to prevent genocide. Because this is something that has been tried by some colleagues in Italy, and the governing authority in this case has come out or replying. The response was about the university being the home to all different sensibilities that we have in society, all different. So you see a different positioning, which of course is instrumental, because they do not want to take any position on these specific issues, because then, as you beautifully said, when it comes to other issues, they go fully political, as anyway they are. Even not taking position is of course a political position. But yeah, I was just curious whether you used any specific legal or whatever formal hook to kind of make the point. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And I'd very much like to know the answer to that question myself, because we've been fishing for these things. I mean, certainly under the Genocide Convention, it's very interesting, I think, to see how that is framed. And it certainly puts a responsibility on states, but also I think on public institutions and public bodies within states to prevent genocide. Now, I'm not sure of the specifics of that, but I think it's something that can be pursued. Certainly, when the Israeli assault started, the International Center for Justice for Palestinians wrote a letter to the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, saying, "Look, you're helping the Israelis. That makes you complicit in genocide." They also sent the same letter to Keir Starmer, who is the head of the Labour Party opposition, because of statements that he'd made. They also sent a letter to him saying, "You better watch out. You could be cited as complicit as well." So I think that that issue of complicity needs more work. But I think it could be a much broader brush, actually, broader weapon to use to force something out of these institutions. I mean, our institution has, I think, has been arguing the same way. Oh, we have so many different students of so many different, backgrounds and opinions, strongly held views. It would be wrong. In other words, it's to actually to oppose genocide, and to stand up for international law. That's somehow divisive. This is what they're saying. It's somehow divisive to stand up for the right thing. I mean, this is the nonsense that we've got. And of course, but within that as well, there is the contrast between Ukraine and Palestine, which I think could really be open to issues of discrimination and so on. But we've not really been down that route. But it's a very interesting question. Thank you.
Very much. Yes, Elif.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I really hope I didn't disturb everybody with background noise. I was not aware my mic was unmuted, if it was unmuted. I'm an international lawyer at the University of Antwerp. Yeah, exactly. So I wrote the legal justification part of a letter we wrote to our faculty. I also registered to speak. So basically, at an opportune moment, I can give more information on that. But basically, my field of expertise is non-state actors and their human rights duties. So actors other than the state. And my professor and I are planning to write an article on the legal obligations of universities. There are currently 2 articles that I found. I haven't been able to analyze them yet. But there are certain framings that we do. First of all, on the question of genocide, according to the Genocide Convention, what is punishable is not just committing genocide as such, but complicity in genocide, aiding and abetting genocide, failing to prevent genocide, and even attempting genocide. Also attempting genocide. So there are a lot of aspects there, and responsibilities fall upon. Especially if a university is a public university, there could be an argument made that it carries the same obligations as the state does, as an organ of the state, as part of the state, because local governments, even despite being autonomous to a degree and having their own legal personality domestically, they still are considered part of the state and can trigger international legal responsibility of the state, according to the European Convention on Human Rights. So universities could be parallel in that regard, analogous. Another route that can easily be taken is the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has done significant work on the illegal settlements on occupied Palestinian territory and business and human rights responsibilities therein. There is actually even a database at the UN level in which businesses are listed that are operating either physically there or in line or together, deeply collaborating, etc. So there's a lot of legal arguments that can be drawn from it. But basically, what I argued in the letter, and I can maybe copy paste the text of the letter into the chat. I'm not sure if the hyperlinks would still be active because that's where all the sources are. I hope so. If not, then I can provide it by email. Basically, even businesses that have the sole purpose of profit have significant obligations not to contribute to, work with, have in their value chains any involvement on illegal settlements. The illegal settlements it's like such a no-brainer given part of international law that there's full consensus. So that's where it has been building up at the United Nations level. So it's listed, it's enumerated. There's a typology, for example, providing surveillance assistance or arms or this or that. And we were able to argue that the university, Bar-Ilan University, that our faculty had an agreement on, was significantly contributing to Israel's internationally wrongful acts. And we linked it through the business and human rights framework. So we said, if a business has these responsibilities, a university, a public university, which has an even higher standard in responsibility in human rights, would have these responsibilities as a principle, and that passed. So actually, we managed to hold the agreement.
Thank you very much. You know, that's maybe what we could do is as one of the follow-ups that we can have is we can change the question. The question that we're asking today is, you know, do universities have an obligation to stop mass atrocities? Maybe we can have a follow-up where we ask, are universities complicit in the mass atrocities that Israel is committing? And then we look for ways of dealing with that. I don't know. What do you think? This is to all of you. Yes, Elif.
I think that it is actually not necessary to establish first that there is complicity before talking about responsibility. I think it's good to first establish that there's a duty. So even if we would find that our university is not contributing, it's good to agree that there is a duty. And I would find it, yeah. So I don't know about the process. So what we would discuss first, absolutely. But as a matter of legal reasoning, I think it's always good to establish the duty first and then see, is this actor violating that duty?
Okay. So your own contribution, the contribution that you're hoping to make, how did you want to start?
Okay, so I would like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Elif. I am a Turkish by nationality. I work in Belgium at the University of Antwerp. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the law faculty and in international law and human rights. In Belgium, the situation is not as bad as in Netherlands, Germany, some of the high Germanic countries, but it is similar. We, of course, also signed, the number of dissenting scholars signed a letter to rectors calling for action. It was not a single rector responded to it in a clear way or in a positive way, let me say. At our faculty, Antwerp is particularly significant because Antwerp is in the Flemish region, in the Dutch-speaking region, and it is the second largest city in Belgium, but it is the most conservative. It has a right-wing mayor and a right-wing population, and it has a significant Orthodox Jewish population, which makes any decision maker quite cautious and concerned, even though it also has a significant, more from a Muslim background, migration group. So it's actually quite a diverse city, but not very mixed, if that's right to say. At our university, different faculties, the deans pressured the rector to just make any statement because it was really becoming embarrassing almost. And the rector then wrote an opinion piece on a famous newspaper arguing why the university should not take a position. Very similar to what others have reflected before, basically saying the university is an agora of different voices. No matter what position people take, some people will be upset. Therefore, everybody, so people can speak to each other. They have to speak to each other with respect. We have to continue keeping this as a safe space for everyone. And anyone speaking should speak from a point of expertise. Yeah, so there was a call for a strike that I joined in, and we spontaneously organized a teach out, and I was going to speak there on the international law aspects of it. I sent an email to all the law faculty colleagues, which then created a problem. Apparently, a right-winger, a faculty member who's also a member of a right-wing party, complained about me to the rector, the dean, and the Center for Jewish Studies at our university, after which I received a response from my supervisor saying, hey, maybe it's good if you apologize for sending that collective email because we're not allowed to use the collective emailing lists. I did not apologize, and we had the teach out, In the end, it turns out my supervisor was advising it as a strategy to reach more people. So, hey, I'm sorry that I did this, and then more people see it. It was not clear at the time, but it really created a chilling effect among a lot of us. We also received an email from our dean, or sorry, our rector, who basically said, academic freedom is not the same as the freedom of expression. You cannot say whatever you want. You have to act with respect. Be extremely cautious when you're speaking to the public or making public statements, and everything you say has to come from fact, evidence, and research, and you cannot make if something is a hypothesis, you have to say it is a hypothesis, which again created a chilling effect. Well, therefore, at our faculty, the most progressive research group, the Law and Development Research Group, we got together, we brainstormed what we could do, and we realized that at the faculty level, at the smallest level, there is a cooperation agreement with an Israeli university, one which actually had a campus on occupied territory before, and it's significantly, very actively supporting the Israeli army with AI technologies, diplomatically, financially, in every way they're supporting, very clear. So we wrote a letter, other colleagues wrote the facts part, I wrote the legal part, based it on the university's human rights policy, but also the international legal framework, arguing as solidly as we could. We collected signatures, then we sent it to the dean, hoping that he would immediately take action by himself. He didn't. He brought it to the faculty council. We tried to make sure that on the one hand, we cooperated really well with a core group of sponsors of the letter and activists, where we divided work between ourselves, regularly had meetings to prepare for every single stage so that we knew exactly who would say what the division of labor was going to be, who would take which role. But we also did our best to kind of open it up for consensus, if that makes sense. So we tried to not become isolated as the crazy academics, but we held faculty events and almost forcefully invited other faculty members to come and talk about their expertise. We tried to frame it as open as possible, saying, hey, you're a health lawyer. Why don't you come talk about any health law aspect about this? To kind of pull in and almost construct consensus. And that helped. That really helped change other people's minds, because while they were speaking, we, from international law perspective, could say, oh, also, as a matter of fact, and then give a presentation on how factually grounded the claims of apartheid and genocide are. So that helped. And when it came to the faculty, it passed with consensus, without a vote, that we would indeed halt the implementation of this agreement. There were definitely people who were unhappy about it. There was also unhappiness about how it came about. There's an allergy to scholar activism. So the dean expressed that he was very disappointed it had to be this way, that in such a small faculty, he had wished that people had trusted the formal, very democratic, very representative mechanisms, and that there shouldn't have to have been a petition or a letter, that people could have just knocked on his door. But of course, then I, for example, would have been one single 29-year-old postdoc who's also a migrant. That would not have been strong. So we are, I think, I am at least very happy with how we did it. And I think that was part of the process of success. Still incredibly insufficient, of course. Our university still hasn't taken any public statement, opinion approach, anything. I'm not very familiar with the whole context. The Hannah Arendt Center, that's linked with Ghent University, made a statement. Then Ghent University, VUB, I'm sorry, the Free University of Brussels. VUB endorsed that statement. That statement is pretty good, I would say, decent. So there are some instances. There's the conflict and development studies in Ghent that are also very progressive, but we are not managing to get any research group or university actually say something. It's very difficult. Again, some are more progressive than others, but still the big institutions are not budging. But we're doing our best, writing op-eds and whatever we can to say, actually, there is, and we're framing it as a duty, not as a, you will regret this, not just as a, this is what we want from you, this is the kind of university we would like to be in, but you are actually carrying a legal duty, a normative duty. It is your commitment, and also international legal framework would require you to take statements.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wants? Oh, yes, Alice.
Sorry, Paula has already talked about the situation in Italy. I just want to add a couple of things. Well, first of all, the University of Milan, where I work, at the University of Milan, there have been no protests by the students, and just a minority of them has been lamenting that there was no official statement about what is going on. I also wanted to add that the cooperation, which begs why, I mean, this raises all sorts of issues, I think. But anyway, we also have a cooperation agreement with both Ariel University in the occupied territories, with Reichman University. And we've long been trying for years now, me and other colleagues, to petition the head of the university and the academic senate and to ask them to rescind these agreements, but to no avail. Recently, there was a petition by students submitted to the university and asking to boycott all academic institutions, including Ariel and Reichman and others. But again, it was not, were hardly anybody voting in favor of this motion. We also have, last week, just in a couple of days, we collected 80 signatures, which is not much, but it was over the weekend. We got no signatures at all from the scientific universities, which are the ones which benefit the most, at least in Milano, from agreements with Israel. They get lots of funds for their activities related to winery, olives, and military equipment and know-how. And I've been writing also to the head of the university, which just answered now as you were talking, and he claims that there's a necessity to be impartial and not to take sides. And he said that he'll come out with a statement himself, and I have here in front of me the text. It's very, very mild. He mentions the Middle East, and as somebody was saying before, I mean, they don't even want to mention Palestine. And it's so, how do you say in English, wishy-washy, that it really could have to do with anything, any country in the world. It's very vague. I mean, and just in the last line, there are just a few words saying, and a ceasefire would be good, but it's really, really mild. So that's all. That's the situation in Milan.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know, is there anyone else who would like to say something? Okay, so maybe we look at this. What would you like universities to do? And this is universities. I know we've talked about it, but maybe if we reiterate 3 things that you'd like universities to do, and we go around the way we started, and also why they should do those things. Yes, Peter.
The first thing is they should condemn the Israeli action in the proper terms, in terms of who the Israelis are killing, and they should say that it's in violation of international law, international human rights law, and it breaches the Genocide Convention. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they should draw attention to the fact that our own government, the UK government, is directly complicit in the Israeli action, and that it's the duty of universities and public bodies to disassociate themselves from that action, and in particular, encourage, under the aegis of university autonomy and academic freedom, to encourage those who want to speak out against their own government. So two utopian propositions for you there.
Thank you. Yes, Ian.
Yeah, I think that what we could do is to take very seriously the boycott, divestment, and sanctions process, which has been extremely effective in other cases. And there are three elements of that which I think we need to emphasize. The first is condemnation. To take this condemnation that we're asked to voice all of the time and to turn it around and to be very clear that we are condemning the Israeli state and we're condemning it for its mass murder, and to be very clear about that, and to do that because we hold the Israeli state to the same standards as any other nation state. We're not singling out Israel, but Israel's actions are putting itself apart and causing this genocide in Gaza. So we hold it to the same standards as any other nation state. Now, you could say, well, I'm not in favor of any other nation state, or blah, blah, there are others as bad. That's not the point. The point is that you're doing it for a reason. You're doing it for a reason because they're breaking law and murdering people. And the second aspect is that there's a history of the use of BDS, which is effective. We've seen it in South Africa around apartheid there, and we see it in specific instances where recently, for example, Puma have backed down from their sponsorship of Israeli sporting associations. And now that's a success, and we should be clear that BDS has successes. It has successes. It brings about effects, and we want to bring about those effects so we can lift the BDS activity. So we need to be clear about that it's targeted with specific goals. And the third aspect is extremely important for universities, which is that it targets institutions and not individuals. It doesn't stop people from talking to each other. And this is one of the myths about BDS that is used by the institutions to try and block it. Our BDS approach is targeted at Israeli state institutions and those institutions in Israel that are complicit in murder, not in the individuals who we talk to, we want to debate with, we want to argue with. We want to set a different playing field for us to have those kinds of debates, to engage in proper scholarly activity. And it's the Israeli state, actually, through its actions, that is actually preventing scholarly debate and activity. So those three elements of BDS are three important measures that we should take seriously, and we should be uniting around BDS as a really powerful weapon for isolating Israel and calling it to account.
I want to continue on Ian's point with one that's very important. So Manchester Palestine Action has a recent win that I need to mention in terms of BDS, which is Fisher German. It was over 2 years campaigning. The person that occupied the roof not long ago is going to be in court next week that we're trying to show support for. So although there's a victory, people are still being convicted for it. We need to really show support, continuous support as well. One thing that hasn't been mentioned that I would like to mention, I took part in last week, was the global strike. It was called by the journalists on the ground. And I've discussed this with my parents, different workers, different teachers, and a lot of people are in favor of global striking because it unites people further. It is hard to organize, as it was asked over the weekend by Bisan, the journalists that we all closely follow. We got a lot of criticism for it, but I have never seen people change their daily life so quickly. We had businesses shut down, a whole road in Manchester. You won't see that on the news though, so we'll let you know here. Sorry, does Paola want to say something before I continue? Okay, I wanted to mention that of Ian because I woke up to the news of Fisher German, something that we couldn't believe in because the protests just kept going and going in Manchester, and like for them to lead somewhere, and I think for a progression of companies to divest, like Puma, Fisher German, kind of like in a line, is a big sign that things are changing, and universities should really follow suit because we again talked about how universities are now gone to ash, and thank you, Elisa, for the link because I keep getting lost in my notes. They're very long all the time, but I think it's really shameful for former academics to not acknowledge their academic colleagues internationally. Those were, after all, top researchers. They were not, and it's not a small university just anywhere. I think it's really important that we keep united with everyone in that sense. And I also think it would be great if I could, for myself, example, be more united with staff. I would love to find that unity. I'm going to try and reach out more. People have told me to go to the reps of UCU and everything. I am trying. There might be stuff happening and I don't know about it. It's so hard to find out because everything is so censored right now. And I think this idea of censorship, it's very hard, even speaking here, making my notes to speak. I found it because it's about the university that I am, by the way, employed by as well. I forgot to mention that in the beginning. I have about 3 different jobs at this university. And it's obviously very hard to say certain things without the fear of being silenced, and not just silenced, sanctioned. I would like to be able to speak with sources, with whatever they like, freely as a student, and many other students, and especially Palestinian students, because they are not heard enough about this and about their families, because they're not listened to in any way. And as we all mentioned, international law, I'm not very well versed in international law, but many people are, and it has been called multiple times. Obviously I don't fully understand why it's taken for granted, but I also do. So yeah, I think I just wanted to follow up on the BDS as a really, really strong movement I'm seeing that is actually working also amongst, how to call it, ordinary people that are not part of political movements. We as a group at Youth Front, we want to unite people that are already pro-Palestine, but they're not too sure about certain things, because I have so many people that are a bit more afraid to take action or afraid to speak out, and we really want to speak more about this. So yeah, but united. So I was reading the chat while answering, but I would love to. I didn't want to speak about University of Manchester, which is obviously even more esteemed than Manchester Metropolitan. Their ties with Israel are also very, very deep, and they're currently denying it, although they basically backtracked on on their agreement that yes, they have ties. Now they were called out, no, they don't have ties. That's kind of a short story. There is a petition going around. Yes, you can add in because I know you're from Manchester.
I'll just add that it's a good thing that they are denying it. It shows that they're responding to the pressure, even if they're lying.
That's actually very true. That's a very good point. And now, obviously, the activists here are working within timelines. They now made a petition that I'm sharing around even at Manchester Metropolitan with the staff. You can find it in the Youth Front's link tree. A lot of things are on Instagram due to the ease of sharing, obviously, and also MCR leftists. But I've literally printed out leaflets and shared and gone to people physically to be like, please support this, because the more numbers, the better. I can never see the numbers of petitions because it's obviously who's behind them. But yeah, I thought it was important to mention that University of kind of copies MMU and MMU so forth because they're so close to each other. Whatever a university does, the other one is likely to follow. So the more pressure, the better. So yeah, I just wanted to mention you before I stop talking. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And yes, Paul.
Thank you. So, I mean, everything that has been said so far, it sounds, brilliant. I would like universities to be, to be very different. Definitely, a sanctuary, for the lack of a better word, where, something that I really felt I really missed in a way, since October, has been although it has happened, in many universities, not in every university, but in many universities, this vocation of coming together and discussing things. So in many universities, students have organized laboratories. Tomorrow I have, for instance, I'm talking to one of those in the University of Pisa, but the same is happening in Cagliari, the same is in Bologna. There has been a huge, a very important process of, that has been involving administrative staff, students and colleagues and so forth and so on. But I think that, I think that there is a larger process, which is a process of, which is a historical one. We all know it very well. We have been talking about this, for ages now. That's sometimes it's called the neoliberalization of universities. At other times, it's talked the de-democratization of university spaces. And I think we are, in that process. I think moments like, like the one phases like the ones we are living through, have a double function. On the one side, kind of revive, resistance, but on the other side are also this, authorities use this, crisis, for the lack of a better word, to introduce, to reform structures, to reform regulations, to reform procedures. So I'm also very worried about that. Before I was mentioning the IHRA, which hasn't, which has this kind of patchy adoption and application in Italy, and I'm really worried that with that in the next year, in 2024, the higher governing authorities that kind of collects all the different rectors from all different universities in Italy will finally, adopt it. So it's this. I wished I wish that the university would become a space where we would not be so busy with paperwork and with a lot of this. Activities and duties which are part of our job. I'm not I don't think we should only concern ourselves with producing abstract knowledge, absolutely not, but I wish we could have more time for also for for being kind of more social and political agents. Not because we know better, not because we are more intelligent than others, but because we are part of a society like anybody else. And also I think a kind of conversation that is not really missing, but I think has been, I see as slightly marginal to all the conversation I've been, taking part in and participating in, which is totally understandable because now there's, I think we are facing, we have to prevent a genocide, if we're not, too late already. So I totally understand that there's a priority. There's a priority there. But I think that we haven't been talking enough about borders, and I'm thinking here to what has been happening last year with the Woman Life Freedom in Iran, and what has happened in 2021 with the retaking of Kabul by the Taliban, and that has been something that really has upset me for such a long time. Everyone cutting their hair in solidarity with Iranian women, but God forbid we're opening the border and and welcome refugees and people seeking international protection from, for instance, from the Iranian state. So I think there's also something that perhaps we should there's also something that we should say about it. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to mention it, but I think it's part of, it's a mirror of the fact that, partially of the fact that there's a priority, but also of the of the fact that university as a space has been, kind of losing losing its vocation of, of being a space for, larger and more, overarching, if you want, social and political critique.
Thank you very much. So maybe we hear from Elisa, Elif, Ute, if you want to say something, and end with Ian.
So I'm not sure I should intervene because I'm not even a speaker here, so I feel I'm interfering.
We interference is allowed.
Okay. I was writing a long message, so I might as well say what I was writing.
Yeah.
I think that Ian's idea of involving Jewish people is really brilliant because it cannot be easily accused of anti-Semitism. And but I wanted to add that what I've been trying to do with some colleagues is to organize as many seminars as possible. So far, only a few, but we want to organize many more on two things. First of all, the legal side, so international law, international humanitarian law, which is hardly ever mentioned in our newspapers, but which is obviously very relevant. And the second thing is on the history of the conflicts. So for example, I'm an historian, and I'm trying to reach out to as many students as possible, and they tell me afterwards they had really no idea. And the reason why I've started doing that is I'm so fed up with both colleagues and journalists sort of forcing us, whenever we talk about Palestine, to profess our horror for the 7th of October. And as if it all started there. And I always object to this. I said, did it really start then, or did it start in 2007, or did it start in 67, or maybe in 48 or 47? Are you sure it didn't start in the 30s? Most students have no idea. So I think the first thing we should do, of course, if it's part of our knowledge, of our expertise, is to tell as many students as possible about the history of the conflict. It didn't start on the 7th of October. That's a very devious way of portraying what is happening. And second, telling students that about even students outside of jurisprudence and outside of political science, what international law is or international humanitarian law. And then I want to suggest maybe we could, I don't know if it is feasible, to imagine that there could be a day where as many universities in Europe as possible devote time, a whole day, to discussing Palestine the same day. I think that would be powerful. It must be difficult to organize it, but I'm sure we can reach out to many universities. In Italy, Paolo and I have many colleagues who are very sensitive with this issue, and maybe we could find one almost in every Italian university, and so others could do. Because I'm sure there are many countries that are not represented here who would like to take part in it. And maybe if we organize it the same day, a whole day devoted to it, and maybe accompanied, I would add, by strikes or the refusal to attend any other class or do anything else, etc. I think it might be a powerful message. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, Elif.
I would like to think, I mean, what do we want from our universities is a slightly different question of what should we do. I think we are not the powerful university structures. What I would like from my university, and I think what we can hope from all of them, is that they treat Israel like any state with the responsibilities of a state, and not as a special protected status that gets to do things because it represents people to whom harm has come in the past. And to take critical approaches to external definitions of what anti-Semitism is, and of how they should police the voice of their own scholars. So basically, do no harm. Like, don't restrict my voice as a scholar if I have expertise on something, to speak on something. And I think that's the best thing, first of all, they can do. What we can demand more from them is not to be complicit. So that I think it does fall upon us to make this as evident, as clear as possible, and get as wide a consensus as possible, convince lots of other colleagues who are usually non-political or not even on the same side as even if they are actively political. We had in this process in Antwerp the student representative of all of the PhDs and the assistants, who is actually a hardcore representative of a far-right party. He came to one of our information sessions faculty-wide that we held on a kind of technical level, and he became convinced at the end of it that yes, indeed, we have a legal duty not to do this. So I think we need to work on that, building consensus as much as possible. And then I think the next step is continue strengthening and building the alliance. That's not what the university as an institution, as a governing body, but us, I think what we should do is continue building alliances between students, staff, faculty, but also once we kind of win over the university, we can expand to cities. Local governments have tons of investments as well. And in the South African example, the apartheid divestments, especially in the US, they were very much between students and students as a part of a branch of civil society, universities together with the academics within and the students that are part of them, but also local governments. And then the local governments would make regulations. Of course, I know that today, both with the climate crisis and with Israel, there are a lot of jurisdictions in which anything that loosely resembles BDS is illegalized, but there are still plenty of places where this is not yet the case, or there's not enough attention yet. And I think we should take advantage of that and frame it as a neutral duty when it's useful, and frame it as a political thing when it's useful.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elif. How about you, Ute?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I joined a bit late. Anyways, I'm very glad to be here, and I feel I'm still more a listener. I'm tuning in from Germany, South Germany, and I feel our benchmark in universities is very low. And yeah, so I think that question, what is the role of the university? I'm also right now starting with what is the question of us as academics? I think that's a bit what you pointed to, Elif, as well. Because if our university is, I mean, in our case, it's not only that they're not taking any position, but they're really silencing, censoring. The only place right now in Germany where people are speaking is in private cultural institutions, and even there they're trying to cancel all those events. So yeah, I think for me it's really the question what to do as an academic. And I mean, there are a few people around, but even the open letters coming from Germany are very small. Anyways, what I would still ask my university is actually exactly that, to encourage people to speak, and also to invite internationals, particularly from Palestine, the MENA region. And there it's also where I would go back. So we are working in the field of international urbanism, and I mean, we're encouraged to work internationally, and I feel, how can we ever go back to internationalization and speak with our colleagues if we are now continuing to either be silent or even trying to censure people that want to speak up against the genocide. So I think it's about encouraging these discussions on the university level. So as I said, I think our benchmark is quite low. And as academics, I've joined now a few other networks, and I think there I would really like to have these teach-ins that we can spread to those students that are actually part of those universities where it's not possible to organize something from within the university. So I really like that idea of building that international network and building knowledge, having teach-ins, so that we can provide something for our students, because I know they feel very lost. Because we have, on the one hand, our politicians, and then we have the people on the street, but the whole institutional body is absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ute. Thank you. And yeah, Ian.
I wasn't going to say anything else, but I just point you to the thing in the chat, which is a link to the Tom Herndl book. We've been having an annual lecture in memory of Tom Herndl, who was murdered by the IDF in 2003. He was an MMU student, a photography student, and we've had lectures by distinguished academics, which are collected together in that book, and we're continuing to try and protect the university as a space for discussion and argument in solidarity with Palestine through the memory of Tom Herndl.
So thank you very much. So thank you to everyone who spoke. This our time for this session is come to, we are about 5 minutes over the time that we'd allocated for this session. This does not mean that we are stopping this conversation. We are doing nothing of the sort. This conversation is continuing. We are not letting the issue go. The next set of conversations in this series is taking place on starting at 6 p.m. in about 20 minutes time. You're all welcome to join us. And then we will, after today, we will again, come back to these questions and look at what more needs to be done, what we can do as academics, as students, as people who are affiliated with or to work with universities. So on that note, unless there's someone who is dying to say something, we say thank you and see you in the next session. Yes, Peter.
I was just saying thank you and goodbye. So,
okay.
Thanks very much. Great to be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have something. I won't die, but I think it's helpful.
That was a very bad choice of words from my part.
No,
yeah,
no
that's not what I meant. Yeah,
I think I might find very helpful as part of this network and alliance that we're building internationally, a shared resource library, both in terms of academic resources, but also simple, practicable advocacy resources. I think if the threshold of building the knowledge from scratch becomes much lower, then more people can help and contribute and be a part of it.
Yes, that's a brilliant idea. Let's keep talking about it. Let's see how we can do it.
Thanks very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very happy I'm connecting with you all. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, and see you in about 20 minutes time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you as well. I really appreciate the space to speak, especially from the youth front. They were very